The city was buzzing with life that afternoon. Sunlight bounced off the tall glass buildings, and the streets were filled with people hurrying to their next meeting, cafe, or errand. Somewhere high above in one of those skyscrapers, a billionaire sat in his private dining area of one of the finest restaurants in the city. He was a man used to control, used to power, used to people following his every command. But today he felt bored. Business meetings, contracts, and endless negotiations had left him craving something different, something unpredictable. The restaurant was quiet yet elegant. Soft music played in the background, and the aroma of freshly baked bread and rich sauces filled the air. Waiters moved gracefully between tables, balancing plates of delicate meals with practiced ease. The staff were well-trained, polite, and professional, but the billionaire's eyes wandered, searching for something or someone different. He didn't want another predictable lunch. He wanted a spark, a moment of amusement. That's when he noticed her, a young waitress, moving between tables with a calm efficiency. Her hair tied neatly, her uniform crisp but simple. There was a grace in her movements, a warmth in her smile, a certain confidence that didn't try to impress but still drew attention. She wasn't just doing her job. She seemed to care about the people she served. Her eyes lit up whenever a customer responded kindly, and she carried herself as though she respected everyone equally, whether they were wealthy or not. The billionaire leaned back in his chair and observed her carefully. He had a reputation for testing people, sometimes for amusement, sometimes out of curiosity. Today it was purely for fun. He wanted to see how someone ordinary would react if put on the spot, and somehow this young waitress seemed like the perfect person for his little experiment. He waved her over when she came near his table. She approached with a polite smile, her posture relaxed yet professional. "Good afternoon," he said, his voice calm but carrying the quiet authority of someone used to being listened to immediately. "I'd like to order lunch, but first, can I ask you a question?" The waitress tilted her head slightly, curious but unshaken. She had probably been asked questions before, some polite, some strange, but there was nothing in his tone that made her nervous. "Of course, sir," she replied. He leaned forward, a playful smirk on his face. "I like to test people sometimes. It's just for fun. Don't take it too seriously. Tell me, if you have 2 coins that add up to 30 cents, and one of them is not a nickel, what are the coins?" He expected her to pause, maybe frown, maybe give a puzzled look. Most people would. Most people didn't like puzzles, didn't like thinking too hard in front of a stranger, especially someone who looked powerful and intimidating. But her expression didn't change much. She looked thoughtful for a brief moment, tapping a finger lightly against her lips, not in hesitation but in calculation. Nearby, a couple of diners noticed the interaction. It wasn't every day you saw a billionaire, known for being sharp and intimidating, chatting casually with a young waitress. Some watched with curiosity, some with amusement, but most continued their meals, unconcerned. The waitress's eyes sparkled with quiet amusement. She had heard riddles like this before, puzzles meant to trick or confuse. But there was a simple logic to it, and she loved challenges. She leaned in slightly, her voice steady and calm. "Sir," she began, "the trick is in the wording. You said one of the coins is not a nickel. That means the other one can be. So the coins are a quarter and a nickel. The quarter is not a nickel and the nickel is, well, a nickel." For a brief moment, the billionaire's smirk froze. He blinked once, then twice, not because the answer was unexpected. He had given the riddle to be solved, but because of how she had delivered it. Calm, confident, precise. There was no hesitation, no flustered tone, no nervous guessing, just clarity and wit. A small smile spread across his face. "Very clever," he said, genuinely impressed. "You see, most people stumble over the details and overthink it, but you don't. That's impressive." The waitress smiled politely, not letting the compliment make her overconfident. "Thank you, sir. I enjoy solving puzzles like this. They're fun," she said simply. The billionaire leaned back in his chair, studying her. He had seen intelligence in many forms before, in business meetings, in negotiations, and in rare encounters, but this was different. She didn't need to prove anything. She wasn't showing off. And yet, her mind worked quickly and accurately under pressure. It was refreshing, almost rare. He decided to test her a little further, still in a playful way. "All right," he said. "Let's see if you're good with numbers in real life, not just riddles. Suppose I gave you 3 options for payment: $20 cash, a $25 gift card, or a $10 coin. Which would you pick if your goal was to maximize value? And why?" She paused for only a second this time. "The $25 gift card, sir. It's the highest value, and it can be used like cash for what you need. It's simple, practical, and maximizes benefit." He raised an eyebrow, impressed again. "Straightforward and smart. I like that." As they continued this small, unusual conversation, he found himself more intrigued by her than he had expected. Most people in his life were cautious, eager to impress, or completely intimidated by him. She, however, was unafraid, polite, and smart without being arrogant. There was a natural charm in her ability to remain grounded while showing intelligence. The waitress returned to her work after their brief exchange, attending to other tables with the same calm efficiency. But the billionaire kept glancing at her, thinking about the way she had answered, the way she had carried herself. It was rare to see someone with such a combination of intelligence, humility, and poise, and he couldn't help but feel a spark of curiosity about her life, her dreams, and her story. Meanwhile, the staff noticed something subtle. The billionaire, who often appeared aloof and detached, was unusually attentive today. He smiled in a quiet, genuine way, occasionally nodding toward the waitress as if sharing a secret acknowledgement with her. She didn't notice it overtly, but there was a sense that their interaction, brief as it was, had left an impression on both of them. Outside, the city continued its rhythm. Cars honked, people chatted, and the sunlight shifted across the buildings. Inside the restaurant, a small, seemingly ordinary interaction was happening. A meeting of two worlds, one wealthy and powerful, the other hardworking and grounded. And yet, in that moment, the divide felt smaller. Respect had formed quietly, subtly, like a bridge between them. By the time lunch service was winding down, the billionaire had decided that today's experiment had been far more interesting than he had anticipated. He had come in looking for amusement, a distraction from the usual routine of contracts and boardrooms, and he had found it in a young waitress who had handled his tests with grace and intelligence. He leaned back in his chair once more, sipping a glass of water, and thought to himself that life sometimes offered surprises in the most unexpected places. He had always believed money could buy power, influence, and respect, but today he was reminded that true wit, confidence, and humility were qualities that couldn't be purchased, and perhaps, that was even more valuable than wealth. As he left the restaurant later, he found himself glancing back toward her. She was busy clearing a table, smiling and speaking kindly to a customer, unaware of the deep impression she had left. And he realized that sometimes the smallest moments, the briefest encounters, could create the most lasting memories. He stepped out into the sunlight, feeling unexpectedly lighter, intrigued by the potential of what he had seen. This was not just a simple lunch. This was the beginning of something different, something that could change his perspective in ways he hadn't imagined. And all it had taken was a simple trick question and a young waitress's first words. Words that had, for the first time that day, truly shocked him. And in that quiet, unassuming way, their story had begun. The next day, the billionaire found himself thinking about the young waitress more than he expected. Her calm confidence and sharp mind had made a deep impression on him. Normally, he would dismiss such encounters as trivial, just a moment of amusement, but something about her lingered in his thoughts. He decided to return to the same restaurant, not out of hunger but curiosity. He wanted to see her again, to observe more closely how she handled people, and perhaps to test her in a slightly more challenging way. When he arrived, the restaurant was already busy with the lunch crowd. The sound of clinking cutlery and low conversation filled the air, creating a familiar hum that made the place feel alive. The staff recognized him immediately. He was someone who usually booked private dining rooms or reserved tables in advance. Today, though, he sat in the main hall, blending with the other patrons, though his presence was impossible to ignore. The waitress noticed him almost immediately. Her eyes flickered with recognition, but she maintained her composure, continuing to serve the other tables with the same attentive care she always did. She didn't rush over, didn't frown or act flustered. She simply carried on, confident in her work. He watched her for a few moments, admiring the way she balanced trays with ease, the way she smiled at customers politely, the way she remembered small details about each table. It wasn't just skill. It was attentiveness, thoughtfulness, and a quiet intelligence that shone through in everything she did. Finally, he waved her over. She approached calmly, her expression neutral but polite. "Good afternoon," he said. "I hope I'm not interrupting. I wanted to speak with you again." "Not at all, sir," she replied. Her voice was steady, friendly, and respectful, but there was an underlying confidence in it that made him take notice again. He smiled slightly. "I have another question for you. It's a little different from yesterday. I hope you don't mind." "Of course not, sir. I like challenges," she said with a faint smile. He leaned back, resting his arms on the table. "All right, imagine this. There are 3 boxes. One contains only gold coins, one contains only silver coins, and one contains both gold and silver coins. Each box is labeled, but all the labels are wrong. You can only pick one coin from one box to figure out which box is which. How would you do it?" He expected her to hesitate, to frown, or maybe even give up. This was trickier than a simple riddle. It required logical thinking and careful analysis. Many people would be intimidated by the question, especially when asked by someone powerful and seemingly impatient. The waitress paused, but only briefly. She tilted her head slightly, as though turning the question over in her mind. Her eyes didn't dart around nervously, nor did her hands fidget. She had learned to think clearly under pressure, and this was just another problem to solve. "Sir," she began, "the trick is knowing that all the labels are wrong. So, I would pick a coin from the box labeled gold and silver. Since the label is wrong, it cannot contain both. Whatever coin I pick will tell me what that box really contains. If it's a gold coin, then that box contains only gold. If it's a silver coin, then it contains only silver. Once I know that, the other 2 boxes can be identified by elimination." The billionaire's eyebrows rose slightly. He hadn't expected such a clear, precise answer delivered without hesitation. He felt a small thrill of surprise. She wasn't just smart. She was confident, logical, and unafraid to speak her mind. "Impressive," he said genuinely. "Most people would overthink it or panic. You solved it quickly and calmly. That's rare." She smiled politely. "Thank you, sir. I like problems that make me think. They're interesting and sometimes fun." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "You know, most people in my life are either intimidated by me or try too hard to impress. You're different. You don't need to prove anything, yet you impress just by thinking clearly. That's a quality not many have." The waitress felt a flicker of curiosity herself. She didn't know much about him, except that he was very wealthy and seemed used to testing people for fun. But there was something intriguing about his manner today. He wasn't condescending, not really. He was interested, genuinely interested, and that was unusual. They continued their brief conversation as she took his order. She didn't rush, didn't fumble, and didn't act differently than she would for any other customer. But he couldn't help noticing small things. The way she remembered exactly what he had ordered the day before, the way she adjusted her tone slightly when she spoke to him, the way she observed the room without being distracted. It was subtle, but it showed intelligence, focus, and awareness. Other diners noticed their interaction too. Some whispered quietly, curious about why the billionaire seemed so engaged with a young waitress. Others watched discreetly, fascinated by the dynamic. It wasn't every day you saw someone so wealthy paying genuine attention to someone they usually wouldn't even notice. As the lunch hour progressed, the billionaire decided to test her a little further, still in a playful way but with a hint of seriousness. He asked her about a scenario involving money, logic, and decision-making, curious not only about her intelligence but also about her values and perspective. Imagine, he said, you were given a choice. You could take a large sum of money now, enough to change your life immediately, or a smaller amount every month for a long time, growing gradually. Which would you choose and why? The waitress considered the question carefully. She didn't need long, but she wanted to answer thoughtfully. I would take the smaller amount over time, sir, she said. It may be less exciting at first, but it provides stability and allows for planning. Life isn't always about big wins. It's about consistency and making thoughtful choices. He smiled, genuinely impressed. That's a wise answer. Most people would grab the big sum without thinking about the long term. You're not only smart, you're thoughtful. That's rare too. She smiled faintly, not out of pride but out of acknowledgement. Thank you, sir. I've learned to think before acting and to consider consequences. It's helped me in life and in work. The billionaire leaned back, feeling a mixture of amusement and admiration. He had come in expecting a little fun, a trivial test, and instead he had found someone who could teach him something, or at least remind him of qualities he admired but rarely saw. As the meal went on, he found himself asking more questions, not for tests, not for amusement, but because he genuinely wanted to hear her perspective. They spoke briefly about her experiences growing up, the challenges she had faced, and the determination that had brought her to this point in life. She spoke with humility, without complaining, and with a sense of resilience that was inspiring. He listened, fascinated. He realized that this young woman, who worked quietly in the background of his world, possessed a clarity and strength that he often sought in business partners, advisors, and even friends. And yet, she had neither wealth nor status. She had only her intelligence, her character, and her composure. By the time the lunch hour was nearly over, he felt a rare sense of satisfaction. He had expected a fleeting moment of amusement, a small test to pass time. Instead, he had found a conversation that challenged him, intrigued him, and left him thinking long after it ended. When she brought the check, he handed it over with a note. For you, he said simply. Not because you need it, but because you've made today far more interesting than I expected. She looked at it, surprised. Sir, I can't accept this, she said gently. You can, he replied, smiling. Consider it a small token of appreciation. You've earned it. She hesitated, then smiled faintly, taking the note with a quiet nod. Thank you, sir. That's very kind of you. As he left the restaurant, he felt something unusual. Curiosity, admiration, and a rare sense of respect. He had come looking for entertainment, and he had found something more meaningful. He had found someone who could hold her own in a world where most people faltered under pressure. Someone whose intelligence, humility, and composure had left a lasting impression. Outside, the city continued to move with its usual pace, but inside his mind, the billionaire replayed the conversation again and again. He was intrigued not just by her answers, but by the way she had carried herself, the way she had handled the situation with confidence and grace. It was a reminder that the most interesting people were not always those with wealth or fame, but those who navigated life thoughtfully, with intelligence and character. And as he walked away, he realized that he would return. Not out of habit, not out of hunger, but because he wanted to see more, to understand more, and perhaps to learn something he had forgotten long ago. That real intelligence and wisdom could be found in the most unexpected places, and sometimes it came in the form of a young waitress who was simply doing her job. The next morning, the billionaire couldn't stop thinking about the young waitress. Her clever answers, calm composure, and humble confidence had stayed in his mind. Usually, people tried to impress him, flatter him, or avoid making mistakes in front of him. But she had been completely different. She had treated him like an ordinary person, yet she had answered every question with intelligence and poise. He decided to return to the restaurant again. This time, he didn't want it to feel like another simple test. He wanted to see how she handled pressure in more real-life situations, how she treated others, and whether her composure held when the restaurant was busy or when unexpected things happened. He was curious, not just for fun, but genuinely intrigued. When he arrived, the restaurant was even busier than the previous day. Lunch hour was in full swing, and waiters moved quickly between tables, balancing plates, taking orders, and responding to questions. The young waitress was at the center of it, handling the chaos effortlessly. She moved gracefully, smiled politely at customers, and seemed to anticipate what each table needed before anyone even asked. He watched her for several minutes, fascinated by her efficiency and focus. There was a quiet strength in the way she worked, a patience that many people lacked. Even when a customer became slightly rude or impatient, she responded politely, never losing her composure. She didn't need to argue or defend herself. She simply handled every situation with calm intelligence. Finally, he waved her over. She approached him, smiling, but there was no trace of nervousness. She was professional, composed, and confident, just as she had been the previous days. "Good afternoon," he said. "I hope you're not too busy. I have another question for you. It's a bit more unusual this time." "I'm ready, sir," she replied, her voice steady, friendly, but curious. He leaned forward slightly, a playful glint in his eyes. "Imagine you were given a choice between helping someone you don't know and receiving a small reward, or ignoring them and receiving nothing. But here's the twist. You don't know the outcome of your help. Would you do it, and why?" The question wasn't a riddle, but it was a test of values, insight, and human understanding. Many people might overthink it or give the right answer they thought he wanted to hear. But she didn't hesitate. She smiled faintly, considering the question carefully. "Yes, I would help," she said confidently. "Not because I expect anything in return, but because helping someone, even when the outcome is uncertain, is the right thing to do. You never know how a small act can impact someone's life, and sometimes that matters more than any reward." The billionaire's eyebrows rose. He wasn't expecting an answer with such honesty and simplicity. She wasn't thinking about impressing him. She was stating her belief, her principle. For a moment, he felt a rare sense of respect. Most people he met were either self-interested or trying to guess his expectations. She was neither. She spoke truthfully. "Very well said," he replied. "You're not only smart, but you have perspective. That's something rare. Many people never learn that, even in a lifetime of experience." He paused for a moment, then decided to push her a little further. "All right," he said. "Let's try something practical. Suppose a customer at this restaurant is rude, complains about everything, and even makes unfair accusations about you. How would you handle it?" She smiled faintly, not in amusement, but in thoughtfulness. "I would stay calm and professional," she said. "I'd listen to their concerns, try to solve any real problems, and respond politely. But I wouldn't take unfair comments personally. Everyone has bad days, and my responsibility is to do my best, not to argue. That keeps me focused and maintains respect for everyone involved." The billionaire leaned back in his chair, a smile spreading across his face. He was increasingly impressed. She wasn't just intelligent. She had emotional strength, patience, and maturity beyond her years. Most people he knew, wealthy, educated, or experienced, didn't respond with such balance in real-life situations. She had a rare combination of wisdom, composure, and humility. As she continued to serve other tables, he watched her carefully. There was a pattern to her actions, a subtle attention to detail that made her efficient without seeming rushed. She didn't just move plates and take orders. She observed the room, remembered the small things, and anticipated needs before they were spoken. A child at a nearby table dropped a spoon, and she bent down with a kind smile to pick it up, handing it back gently. A customer asked for a slight change in their order, and she responded politely, solving the problem quickly. She didn't complain, she didn't sigh, and she didn't make it seem like a burden. Every movement, every action, reflected thoughtfulness and care. The billionaire couldn't help but feel a sense of admiration. In his world, people often acted out of obligation, ego, or expectation. Here was someone acting purely from skill, intelligence, and heart. It was inspiring in a way he hadn't anticipated. At one point, he decided to give her a slightly harder challenge. Not a riddle, not a question, but a situation that tested both her intelligence and her intuition. He asked her to help a confused customer at another table, someone who clearly didn't understand the menu and was becoming frustrated. She walked over gracefully, smiling warmly. "Hello, sir," she said to the customer. "I can help you choose something you'll enjoy. Do you have any preferences or allergies I should know about?" The customer looked relieved and began explaining their confusion. She listened carefully, asked a few clarifying questions, and then suggested a dish that suited their taste. She even recommended a drink pairing. The customer's face lit up with appreciation. "Thank you so much. You've made this so much easier," they said. The billionaire watched the interaction silently, a mixture of admiration and surprise on his face. She didn't just answer questions. She solved problems, thought ahead, and made people feel comfortable and valued. He realized that this ability to remain calm, think clearly, and act with kindness was far more rare than any intelligence or wealth he had encountered in his world. After the lunch hour began to wind down, he called her back to his table. "I have to admit," he said, "I came here expecting a bit of fun, a distraction from the usual routine, but today you've done more than answer questions. You've shown intelligence, patience, and character that are truly impressive." She smiled politely. "Thank you, sir. I just try to do my best every day. That's all anyone can do." He leaned forward, studying her. "You know," he said, "many people in my life are focused on status, power, or showing off. You, however, are focused on what really matters. That's rare, and it's refreshing." She tilted her head slightly, curious but unassuming. "I believe everyone has their own strengths. Some people show theirs with wealth or status. Others, like me, show theirs through work and thoughtfulness." The billionaire nodded slowly, impressed by her perspective. "Exactly. That's why I find our conversations so interesting. You see the world differently than most people I know, and yet your perspective is clear, practical, and grounded. That's a rare combination." Before leaving, he handed her a small envelope. "Consider this a token of appreciation," he said. "Not because you need it, but because today has been enlightening for me. You've reminded me of qualities that are often overlooked in the rush for wealth and power." She hesitated, then took it with a quiet nod. "Thank you, sir. That's very kind." As he walked out of the restaurant, he felt a sense of satisfaction he hadn't experienced in a long time. He had come looking for amusement, a simple distraction, and instead had discovered someone whose intelligence, character, and kindness left a lasting impression. For the first time in a long while, he found himself reflecting not on business deals or investments, but on human qualities, strength, patience, humility, and clarity. He realized that true brilliance wasn't always found in boardrooms or bank accounts, but sometimes in ordinary people who carried themselves with dignity and intelligence. Outside, the city moved with its usual rhythm, but inside his mind, the encounter replayed in detail. He was captivated not only by her answers but by the way she approached life. Calm, composed, intelligent, and kind. She hadn't just impressed him. She had challenged his perspective, reminding him that sometimes the most remarkable people are those who don't seek attention, status, or praise. And as he left the restaurant, he made a quiet decision. He would return, not out of habit, not out of hunger, but because he wanted to understand more, to see more, and perhaps to learn from someone whose intelligence and character were as remarkable as they were unexpected. That day, the billionaire realized something important. The world often underestimated people based on their position, job, or status. But intelligence, composure, and wisdom could be found in the most surprising places. And sometimes a simple encounter, a few questions, a brief conversation, could open a door to understanding qualities far more valuable than wealth or power. Over the next few days, the billionaire found himself returning to the restaurant more often. At first, he had come purely out of curiosity, driven by the intrigue of the young waitress who had impressed him with her intelligence and calm demeanor. But as he watched her work day after day, he began to notice something deeper. It wasn't just her sharp mind or her quick answers to his playful questions. It was her kindness, her thoughtfulness, and the way she treated everyone around her with respect, regardless of who they were. The restaurant was bustling one afternoon, full of the usual lunch crowd. Waiters moved quickly between tables, but the young waitress handled everything effortlessly. She greeted customers warmly, remembered their preferences, and solved problems calmly and politely. Her attention to detail made the dining experience smoother for everyone. She didn't rush, didn't frown, and didn't seem fazed by the constant movement around her. She was fully present in every moment, and it showed. The billionaire arrived, taking a seat at his usual table. He noticed her immediately, carrying a tray with a steady hand and a gentle smile. She had already recognized him from the previous visits, but there was no fakeness in her greeting. She approached him politely, confident but humble. "Good afternoon," she said. "Would you like your usual, or something different today?" He smiled. "I think I'll try something different today. Surprise me." She nodded and went to place his order. While she was gone, he watched her interact with the other customers. One family had a small child who was fussy and restless. Instead of growing frustrated, she knelt down and spoke to the child gently, asking about their favorite foods and making them laugh with a light joke. The parents looked relieved, clearly appreciating her patience and care. Another customer had accidentally spilled a drink, and she quickly cleaned it up without making a fuss, reassuring the customer that it was no problem. Even in moments that could have been stressful, she remained calm and composed. The billionaire found himself thinking about how rare it was to see someone handle pressure with such grace and efficiency. When she returned with his meal, he decided to shift the conversation from riddles and puzzles to something more personal. He wanted to understand the person behind the intelligence, the woman behind the polite and composed exterior. "Can I ask you something?" he began carefully. "You've impressed me more than I expected. But I'm curious, what drives you? What motivates you to be so thoughtful, so composed, and so intelligent?" She paused briefly, as though considering her answer. Then she spoke with quiet honesty. "I think it comes from experience, sir. Life hasn't always been easy for me. I faced challenges that taught me the value of patience, thoughtfulness, and staying calm. I've learned that how you respond to situations matters more than the situations themselves. And I try to carry that into everything I do." He nodded slowly, impressed by her self-awareness. "That's remarkable," he said. "Most people either get frustrated or try to show off when life is difficult. You approach it differently. You think before you act. You stay grounded. That's rare." She smiled faintly, not out of pride, but out of understanding. "I believe everyone can learn that, sir. It just takes practice and reflection. Some people have to experience more to understand it." He leaned back, studying her. "You've had experiences that shaped you, and yet you've retained your kindness and humility. That's something I admire." Their conversation was interrupted briefly by other customers, but he noticed the small ways she handled it. Always polite, always attentive, never losing focus. After a few moments, they returned to their discussion. "Have you ever thought about your future?" he asked. "Where you want to go, what you want to achieve?" She thought carefully. "I have dreams, sir. I want to grow, learn, and make a life for myself that's meaningful. I want to help people in my own way and to do work that makes a difference. It doesn't have to be grand or noticed by everyone. I just want it to matter." He felt a sense of admiration that went beyond amusement or curiosity. Here was someone who had clarity about what mattered in life, who valued impact over recognition, and who carried herself with humility and integrity. It was a rare combination, and he found it both inspiring and humbling. As the lunch hour began to slow, he decided to test her understanding of people, not puzzles or riddles this time, but empathy and insight. "Imagine this," he said. "You see someone struggling silently. They aren't asking for help, but it's clear they're in need. What would you do?" She smiled gently. "I would try to understand what they need without forcing it. Sometimes people just need someone to notice them, to acknowledge that they're not alone. Other times they need practical help. I'd offer what I could in a way that respects their dignity." The billionaire was struck by her answer. It wasn't just intelligent, it was wise. Many people in his world would have given superficial answers or acted out of pride. She was different, Her understanding of people was genuine, and it came from experience and empathy, not from books or advice. They continued talking, moving from personal experiences to values, to how she viewed the world. She spoke about kindness, patience, and integrity. He listened, fascinated. He realized that this conversation was more meaningful than any business meeting, any negotiation, or any contract he had ever been involved in. By the end of the lunch, he knew he wanted to do something that went beyond simply appreciating her intelligence. He wanted to offer an opportunity, something that could help her achieve her dreams. But he didn't want to do it as a handout. He wanted it to feel fair, to feel meaningful, and to reflect the qualities he admired in her. As she brought the check, he handed her an envelope. "This isn't just a tip," he said quietly. "It's a token of appreciation, and a way to open doors if you want them. I want to support someone who has talent, intelligence, and character. And I believe you have all three." She looked at it, her eyes widening slightly in surprise. "Sir, I don't know what to say," she said softly. "I've never had anyone offer something like this to me before." He smiled gently. "You don't have to say anything. Just know that I see your potential, and I want to help you reach it if you're willing. You don't need to accept it now. Take your time, think about it, and decide what's best for you." She nodded, a mix of gratitude and humility in her expression. "Thank you, sir. I appreciate it more than words can say." As he left the restaurant, he felt a sense of fulfillment he hadn't experienced in a long time. This wasn't about testing her intelligence or playing a game. This was about recognizing talent, character, and potential, and offering a chance to grow. He realized that wealth and power were meaningless without the ability to see and nurture what was truly valuable in people. Outside, the city moved on, unaware of the small but significant interaction that had just taken place inside the restaurant. For the billionaire, this encounter was a turning point. He had come looking for amusement, curiosity, and distraction. Instead, he had found someone who reminded him of what truly mattered: kindness, intelligence, humility, and the courage to stay true to oneself. And for the young waitress, this encounter was equally significant. She had been recognized not just for her skill or intelligence, but for her character. Someone powerful had seen her potential and offered a chance to grow, not because of who she was serving, but because of who she was. It was a reminder that true recognition comes from seeing people for who they really are, not for the roles they play or the jobs they hold. As she continued her work that afternoon, she carried a quiet sense of pride, not in arrogance, but in the knowledge that her efforts, intelligence, and values were being noticed. She had handled challenges, solved problems, and remained true to herself, and that had made a difference. The billionaire, walking through the streets afterward, thought about how rare it was to meet someone like her. Someone who could challenge him intellectually, inspire him personally, and remind him of the human qualities that mattered most. He realized that this relationship, simple as it seemed, could have a lasting impact, not just for her but for him as well. By the time he reached his car, he had made up his mind. He would continue to support her, offer guidance when appropriate, and provide opportunities for growth. But he would do it in a way that respected her independence, her intelligence, and her humility. This wasn't about power or control. It was about recognizing value where it existed and helping it flourish. And in that quiet, unassuming way, a bond had formed. Not a friendship defined by status or wealth, but a connection based on respect, admiration, and a shared understanding of what truly mattered in life. After several visits to the restaurant, the billionaire felt a change within himself. What had started as curiosity and amusement had grown into something deeper, a genuine respect and admiration for the young waitress. He found himself thinking not about deals, contracts, or money, but about her perspective on life, her intelligence, and her quiet strength. He realized that someone so grounded and thoughtful could teach him more than any boardroom ever had. One afternoon, as the restaurant grew busy with the lunch crowd, he arrived early and took his usual table. The young waitress noticed him immediately, giving him a polite, confident nod. There was no hesitation in her manner, no trace of nervousness. She had become familiar with his presence, but their interactions were still genuine. He waited patiently as she served other customers, observing how she managed the room. A customer was confused about the menu, and she approached them with patience and a calm smile, explaining the dishes in simple words and offering helpful suggestions. A child at another table spilled their drink, and she cleaned it up gently, comforting the child with a light joke. The billionaire watched her quietly, feeling admiration rise again. When she approached his table, he spoke with an unusual warmth in his voice. "Good afternoon. Today, I want to talk about something a little different. It's not a question or a riddle. It's about you and your future." She looked at him, slightly surprised but curious. "I'm listening, sir," she replied. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "You have talent, intelligence, and character. I've seen it in how you handle challenges, how you think, and how you treat people. You've impressed me more than I expected. And I want to offer you an opportunity. Not because you're a waitress, but because of who you are." Her eyes widened slightly. She wasn't expecting this. She had grown up learning that life was hard, that opportunities didn't come easily, and that people in power often ignored those who worked quietly behind the scenes. "Sir, I don't know what to say," she whispered softly. "You don't need to say anything right now," he said. "I just want you to know that I believe in your potential. I want to help you achieve your dreams, whatever they may be. You have a chance to grow, learn, and take steps toward a life that's meaningful to you. And I want to support that, if you choose to accept it." She was quiet for a moment, processing his words. It was hard to believe that someone so powerful, someone with the world at their feet, would see her. Not for her job, not for her role, but for who she truly was. Her heart beat faster, a mix of excitement, gratitude, and disbelief. "Sir, I don't even know how to thank you," she said finally. "I've never had anyone offer me something like this before. I don't take it lightly, and I'll do my best not to disappoint you." "You won't disappoint me," he replied. "I don't expect perfection. I just expect honesty, hard work, and staying true to yourself. Those are qualities that money can't buy, and you already have them." She smiled, a quiet, genuine smile, feeling a sense of hope she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't about the money, the opportunity, or the recognition. It was about being seen for who she really was, and having someone believe in her potential. Over the next few weeks, the billionaire began helping her in small but meaningful ways. He arranged for mentorship opportunities, introduced her to people who could guide her career, and offered advice on decisions she faced. Every step of the way, he made it clear that he respected her independence and intelligence. He didn't want to control her path, he wanted to support it. She learned quickly, absorbing knowledge and experience like a sponge. She asked questions, sought advice, and applied what she learned with confidence and humility. Her growth was remarkable, and the billionaire watched with pride as she navigated challenges with the same calm intelligence he had first noticed. One afternoon, he returned to the restaurant, and she greeted him warmly. "Sir, it's good to see you," she said, smiling. "I've been working on some of the things you suggested, and I think I'm starting to understand them better now." He smiled in return. "That's wonderful to hear. You've always had the ability, but now you're applying it in ways that will make a real difference. I'm proud of your progress." They spoke for a while about her experiences, the lessons she had learned, and the goals she was setting for herself. He listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions and offering guidance when appropriate. Their conversation was no longer about riddles or tests, it was about life, growth, and understanding. One day, he invited her to a small meeting with a few trusted advisors and mentors he thought could help her. She was nervous at first, aware that she was stepping into a world very different from the one she had known. But she carried herself with the same calm confidence and intelligence that had first impressed him. She listened carefully, asked insightful questions, and shared her thoughts with clarity and honesty. The advisors were impressed. They had expected someone inexperienced or timid, but instead, they found a young woman who could think critically, communicate effectively, and demonstrate both humility and confidence. The billionaire watched quietly, smiling to himself. She had always had the potential, and now the world could see it too. Months passed, and her life began to change in meaningful ways. Opportunities she had never imagined were opening up, but she remained grounded and thoughtful. She never forgot where she had come from, the lessons she had learned, or the values that had guided her. And through it all, the billionaire remained a supportive presence. Not controlling, not overbearing, but encouraging and guiding when needed. One evening, after a long day of work and meetings, she returned to the restaurant to see him one last time before a big new opportunity took her away from the city for a while. She found him at his usual table, reviewing papers quietly. "Sir," she said softly, approaching him, "I wanted to thank you one more time before I leave. For everything. For seeing me, believing in me, and giving me a chance to grow. I'll never forget it." He looked up, smiling warmly. "You've done all the work, not me. I just helped open a few doors. You walked through them yourself, with intelligence, courage, and integrity. That's what made the difference. I'm proud of you." She felt a surge of emotion but kept her composure. "I promise to carry everything I've learned with me, sir. And I'll make sure to stay true to who I am, no matter where I go." "That's all I could ever ask for," he replied. "Remember, intelligence and talent are important, but character, humility, and kindness will always take you further than wealth or status ever could." She nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude and respect. "I understand, sir. Thank you for everything." As she left the restaurant that evening, she felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Her life was about to change in ways she had never imagined, but she carried with her the lessons, values, and guidance that had been given to her. She knew she was ready to face the challenges ahead, not because someone had given her an opportunity, but because she had the intelligence, character, and determination to make the most of it. The billionaire watched her leave, feeling a sense of fulfillment he hadn't felt in a long time. He had come seeking amusement, curiosity, and perhaps a moment of distraction. Instead, he had found someone whose intelligence, humility, and kindness reminded him of what truly mattered in life. He realized that helping her wasn't just about offering opportunity, it was about recognizing value where it existed and nurturing it with respect and understanding. Days turned into weeks, and the young waitress continued to grow in her new opportunities. She faced challenges, learned from mistakes, and celebrated successes, always staying grounded and true to herself. And the billionaire, though no longer seeing her every day, continued to watch from a distance with pride, knowing that he had been part of a journey that changed a life. Their story, which began with a simple trick question, had transformed into something far more meaningful. It was a story of recognition, growth, respect, and the power of seeing people for who they truly are. It showed that wealth and power were meaningless without the ability to recognize and nurture true talent and character. And in the quiet moments, both of them reflected on what had happened. She had gained guidance, opportunity, and belief in herself. He had gained perspective, humility, and a reminder of the qualities that truly matter in life. Both had grown in ways neither had expected, all from a simple encounter in a restaurant, a few thoughtful questions, and the courage to remain true to oneself. As the city moved around them, full of noise, ambition, and distractions, their story stood apart. A story of connection, respect, and the transformative power of intelligence, humility, and kindness. It was a reminder that sometimes, the smallest encounters can change the course of a life, and that recognition and belief in someone's potential can create a ripple effect that lasts far longer than anyone could imagine. And in that way, the young waitress's life was forever changed, not by wealth alone, but by someone who had the insight to see beyond status and recognize true value. And the billionaire, too, was changed, reminded that the most remarkable people are not always those in positions of power, but those who navigate life with intelligence, integrity, and heart. Their paths had crossed in a way that neither would forget. A meeting of minds, hearts, and respect. And it all began with a simple test, a trick question, and a young woman whose first words had truly shocked him.